Live from the Scheinfeld Center Innovator Studio at Santa Barbara City College. It's the Enlightened Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Sampson, director of the Scheinfeld Center, and thank you for joining us here to build livelihoods that matter, be your own boss, and make the world an even better place. Well, one way that companies innovate to remain competitive is through intrapreneurship, which is entrepreneurship applied within an existing company. An intrapreneur uses the resource and capabilities within an established company to develop an innovative idea or project that will help improve the performance of the company. So the question is, how can you become an intrapreneur, and how can you recognize companies that support intrapreneurship to successfully navigate therein? Well, coming to us from Paris, France, to break it down is Moyosola Okoye, who has over 20 years success as a business strategist, innovator, and growth hacking professional by building and mentoring multifunctional teams to deliver innovative marketing and product innovation strategies and trade activation. She has worked as an entrepreneur, business owner, and board member to commercialize ideas that seemed illogical. Moyosola now leads end-to-end strategy team at Kellogg's in Europe, where she works to drive business growth and profitability. Moyosola, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Julie, for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
All right, let's jump right in. So could you share what motivates you to apply entrepreneurship within an existing organization as an entrepreneur, rather than, for instance, focusing on your own company?
Right. I think the first thing you get, in a company is resources. So you kind of, it's actually a very good platform. First of all, a lot of companies today are looking for growth. Practically every single industry has been impacted, with everything happening in the world, whether it's COVID or right now, whether it's the war in Russia, at least in Europe, we feel it more. Shortages of ingredients, supply chain. So there's so many areas where a lot of companies are struggling in general. So that growth mindset, entrepreneurial mindset is needed, agility. So, but they already have resources, they have capabilities already that you can leverage. Meanwhile, if you decide to start on your own, you need a lot. It's not just money. You need grits, you need ideas that people are going to buy into. You need mentorship to drive that growth. So, you can get the money, you can probably have a great idea, but then you may be a great inventor, but you may not be a great entrepreneur. It's two different things. And I think we put both together because we have a great idea, doesn't make us a great entrepreneur. They're different, it's different profiles. So I think that's kind of why today, more than ever, it becomes more important even to have that entrepreneurial mindset.
So to help our audience understand entrepreneurship, could you share one of your favorite projects that you've worked on that really exemplifies entrepreneurship?
So I think one of my favorite one actually was actually during COVID. It was during COVID when we had to sell more with what we had. So we couldn't wait for innovations because there was just no time. So this particular project we called it the Export Expansion Project, but we had been working on it for like 2 to 3 years before then. But when you have the mindset of scarcity and let me say constraints, I think it drives actions faster. So this time around, we had constraints and we did have scarcity of resources, actually. And so now we needed to get results quicker and faster. So with that type of mindset, we couldn't get new employees. So there was hiring freeze. So normally we would have employed people and then created an export team and then, kind of gone through the whole rigor of setting up, processes and system. everybody did it. Then we used to say we had a day job and our night job. And literally, this was kind of our night job that we had to do as well as our day job to bring growth for the business. And so we had to put in that system, that process, which meant that we were more efficient in how we did it. We were a lot more agile in how we did it. We had the typical startup mindset, even though, of course, we still had the backing of the company. And that was really good. We got results. We came up with a strategy, in less than 3 months. There was border closures. There was so many things. We had the business proposition. We did the feasibility study. Within 3 months, we were shipping products. We were. And before the end of the year, we were able to get through new countries and loads of containers out. So that's, for me, that was my favorite one, was just that I've never done supply chain. And it's more like a supply chain project, but just the way I led the team and the way we kind of came together and the synergy brought about something that we hadn't done in 3 years, and we achieved within 8 months or less even. And so that's kind of what I think entrepreneurial mindset does for you. It really pushes you to go beyond your comfort zone a lot of times.
That's such a great example, and it really demonstrates how this entrepreneurial mindset, working as an intrapreneur, can really bring value to the company and help them navigate a really tremendously challenging situation and come out with positive impact. That's a great example. Thank you. So based on your personal experience and observing others, what are the top 3 characteristics that you think exemplify successful intrapreneurs, and why are these characteristics important?
That sounds easy, but I think it's difficult. The first characteristics is going to probably sound strange, is curiosity. Most of the time, in most companies, nobody is employed as an entrepreneur, by the way. So it's not like you come in and they're saying, we want an entrepreneur. No. Though most companies would have as a value or principle, either they would say things like, we want ownership mindset, or they would say we want entrepreneurial mindset, or they would say we want agility mindset. And I think one of this kind of fits into an entrepreneurial mindset, so to speak, right? But curiosity, why I said curiosity is because if you focus on just your department, so whether you're in marketing, finance, supply, it doesn't matter, what you're employed for, you would never have that thinking of, so what else, what can I bring? Where can I add extra value? What ideas can I bring to the table that can help the company grow, right? So that's the first thing. So that curiosity makes you, understand more about other departments, what's the need for them, what's their pain point, and maybe better what to bring to the table based on, your experience or just your background. So that's one thing. The other thing is that generalist mindset. So if you have a generalist mindset, you're an expert in an area. But if you have a generalist mindset, that means that you're constantly thinking like a general manager. And that means that you're constantly saying, what's the end goal? So you're not doing a job, you're actually doing a business. And when you have that generalist mindset, you're more particular about business impact, not your job impact. So the fact that your colleague didn't do something, actually, how I put it, makes you understand why didn't they, what could I do to help them do it? You don't end up saying, I finished my job and that's it, let's go on. I think that's the other thing. And then the last point is agility, that hunger for results. And if you're very hungry for results, you want to drive, you have a drive, you're not, you don't allow systems, processes to bog you down. You're always thinking, I tell people, your job may feel boring, but it's only boring because you made it boring. Right? Like you can always innovate. Now, I purposely didn't mention innovation because that's kind of the go-to, right? But, the innovative thinking for me is general, but I purposely didn't mention that because that's too generic. I feel like just understanding the specifics helps you to think better, because you may not work in innovation, but you need those three to get that innovative thinking and to push that entrepreneurial mindset. You could be innovative, but you will not be entrepreneurial. That's the thing. That's the kind of the difference. So for me, those three is quite important. When you have it, then you're ready, to drive that entrepreneurial push, so to speak.
That's such a great summary, of three really important characteristics, and such a good example of how an entrepreneurial education that's hands-on, where students actually get to practice these skills, can come out being so advantageous for them, whether they're running their own business or working within. So earlier you talked about within an organization, one of the benefits is that you have the resources of the organization to work with. As an entrepreneur, however, what are some of the challenges that you encounter typically?
Oh, slow decision making. That is the how I put it, the strength is also the weakness. So the strength of the companies is you have resources, you have systems, you have processes that can help you faster. Is also the weakness. So the process does slow you down. The rate of decision making does slow you down. And then a lot of big companies are risk adverse most of the time. So, when you bring up these ideas, you need to prove it's going to work. You need to show what's going to be the return on investment. You need to kind of go for the 3-year plan. You need to talk about, what's the capital investment, so there's like loads of questions. Then there's all the stage gates you have to jump through, because most companies will have like 3-4 stage gates before you can even launch. And then, with that, it could take like 2 years before your idea even comes to fruition, or 3 years. And it's almost like, when? So that is kind of one of the biggest, barriers to being entrepreneurs. And that's also why some people decide, I'm just going to start my business, because, you can make a decision now and do it tomorrow. You don't need all the gates blocking you.
Yes. So if we could just kind of delve into that a little bit, so with these things that you encounter that can be the challenges, is there anything that you found really helps navigate that? Anything that you can do to really help navigate that through those gates and the slowdown that can happen within a company?
So there's a couple of things. One is, it's very important first to make sure that the company you're with, it's a company that is willing to handle risk. And what some companies do is that they do give you some flexibility of risk, right? A lot of tech companies, for example, does allow you to have what they would call the experimental budget. So you can have some risk. That's one. So I think the company culture is really important, very, very important. So that's one. The second thing is that you need to have a sponsor. So you can't be a lone man. Because you have a great idea does not make it. It doesn't mean it's going to fly, right? So you need to have a sponsor. I mean, with the example I gave you, it was really the company saying, we need growth. Who can help? And then after, one of my bosses said, can you lead this team? So there was that, if people have already recognized that you are one of the few people that knows how to connect the dots, bring quite a bit of breadth of understanding to an issue, yes, you will always get called, right? But you also need to push yourself forward, because I also push myself forward to say, I want to go on this project, so I want to go on that project. But the biggest thing is a sponsor. If you have a sponsor, then there's somebody sitting on the board pushing the agenda for you. So that way you can also overcome. Then I also, the last point also is that you need to be able to help the company manage the risk. What does that mean? You need to be able to show, okay, this is the first phase. This is what we will do. This is going to be, if it doesn't work, this is the cost to the company, right? If this works, we will require this amount of investment. We'll go to phase 2, right? But the issue is, if you come with a grand idea, $100 million idea, and we're going to get it in 1 year, yeah, it's all well and good. It's great, 100 million. But if you're asking for an investment of 50 million upfront, or even 5 million upfront, it's still a lot, right, for the company to put down when they're not sure 100 million is going to come through. So it's almost like a chicken and egg. So there are times, like there's some projects where we have said, why don't we have a contract manufacturer, or why don't we go look for a small company that already does something similar? Let's work with their business model. Let's ride on it. So a lot of test and learn to prove the concept and then take it forward. So you almost need to think about it as, the way you would start your own business, where you would have to go to a VC to present your business plan and convince them for funding. It's kind of the same internally. The only difference is that they're a lot tougher than a VC. A VC could say, I'm willing, and I'll take some shares, but internally, if it goes wrong, everybody loses their shares in a way. So it's, it's just tougher, that's all. But it needs to be very strong.
Great. That's such a great example of how that capacity to pitch an idea works. It's just as important inside a company as outside, with VCs like you're talking about. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
So in your current job at Kellogg's, you work as director of the end-to-end growth strategy, where you use a growth hacking mindset to drive business growth. Could you tell us a bit about that growth hacking mindset and why it's so important?
Yeah, so, growth hacking mindset is just the ability to peel the onions until you find the nuggets in it, right? So, part of my categories, I work across different categories. Part of my categories is cereal. You think of breakfast cereal, how much more are you going to sell? Like, how much more are you going to take, right? So, right. So where do you find the growth? So you can't assume that, okay, you know what, Julie, you're going to keep on eating cereal and I'll be fine. Everybody, there's life changes, there's different things. And with today's world and, where like we always say there's a food revolution. So there's now a lot of different options. It wasn't like 100 years ago when the pop was corn. The corn was popped and we got this flake, where then it wasn't like that. Now it's very different. People have loads of options compared to then. So now the question is, how do you then find growth? So that growth hacking mindset is you start to look for pockets of growth. How do you look for pockets of growth? There's quite a lot of what we call the food tech funds. So when you go to places that have food tech funds, so if I take I know the European ones. So in Germany is kind of the hub for food tech funds. And so when you go there, you find different types of innovation on different types of food formats. It gives you a good idea about where the future is going. It gives you a good idea about what's going to make sense. And then as a big company, with already the resources, is just to say, right, what could we do differently that goes with our ethos, that goes with our ambition, our business objective, to drive new growth, right? So as a big company, we are not, big companies is where it's actually more difficult to do in big companies and small companies. So you just need to find that growth. And that's what growth hacking is all about. Growth hacking is just that mindset of there's growth around you every single day. And it's just about finding it. And that's why I said you keep on peeling the onions until you find the nuggets. So you don't go, oh yeah, there's no more cereal to sell. There is a lot to sell. It's just a question of what is that new breakfast idea? What is that nugget that people are going to appreciate to buy, right? And that's kind of where the growth hacking mindset comes from. And also to summarize, that is one of those things where, a lot of people don't know what they want. So if I ask you, what you want tomorrow, you probably don't know. What you wanted yesterday, you probably didn't even remember. But part of our job, when you have that growth hacking mindset, is to imagine. It's almost like creating something people haven't even imagined that they wanted, and help them see how they need it. Right. And that's all. So and when you find a nugget, not everybody wants a gold bar, but depends on how you do it. Some people will buy earrings and some people will buy rings. So, but they don't want the gold bar. They don't want the liability of the gold bar, right? So it's kind of, when you find the nuggets, what's the angle to bring that nuggets to life? But and some people may not even buy jewelry, right? But they may like gold-plated cutlery, right? So it's really, and that's what growth hacking does, is what's that nugget that people would appreciate for you to take forward?
Your expertise and background is amazing. Could you share a bit about the key factors that prepared you for success as an entrepreneur within a company?
Okay, Julie, my journey has been quite, I would say, I think it's unusual, maybe not, but I would say what prepared me. Okay, so I have an engineering background. That's kind of what I finished with. And just by chance in life, I just didn't do the engineering. Not that I didn't want to, but it just happened I didn't. But having said so, I decided I was going to have a business degree on top. So that's kind of what made me go for MBA. But when I went for the MBA, I focused on entrepreneurship and general management. Why? Because I already had some experience of work. I already understood the workplace. And that's why I think, I know some MBAs, I'm not criticizing any, but I know some MBAs would take people that don't have work experience, but I've seen that just understanding the workplace and what happens there really, really helps. So for me, by the time I finished the MBA, the value was huge. I wasn't going to, the plan for me, it wasn't about, being the next CEO, opening the next business, but it really made me hungry to drive impact. So there was no project I would work on, and I'm going to question you until I'm sure I'm driving impact. So my boss won't just say, do this, and I do it. No. What does that mean? Where are we going to see is there going to be profits in it? What's going to happen? How is it going to be used? And that is really important for me. But now, the critical thing I can say helped me a lot is the hunger for continuous learning. That was important, right? The other thing is just understanding what is going on in the, in general, in terms of trends, is very important. So what do people want? But then what's the impact of what's happening? Elections is happening. What's that going to mean? What could it be? What could it drive? It's raining tomorrow. I know that sounds silly, but what could that mean? More people use umbrellas. Okay, maybe I need to sell more umbrellas if I sell umbrella, or at least if I'm in that industry. What could I link to the weather? How could I? So it's kind of like you really have to always have the mindset of continuous learning, and that will give the different skills. So in my context, I've always been very particular about continuous learning. The other thing is that I have done, I've done it's quite a bit of different types of consulting just to get my hands really dirty. So it's not just about, one direction. So I've had a bit of career deviation, where I've worked in different departments, different projects to give me breadth of understanding. Then you come back to the path that you want to continue. So there are different ways to prepare yourself. To be honest with you, Julie, I'm not sure there's one way to prepare yourself, but I think if you're passionate about continuous learning, which I would imagine, a school like yours can give, to people, right? Even if it's just a 1 week thing, a 3 days thing, to immerse yourself, because in that way you're always current. I've left school donkey years ago. I don't want to think of my age, but I've been studying ever since then. I'm still a student. right? So it's kind of like, and that gets you embedded, because then you know what to do, because it's more impactful for today, not for yesterday.
Fantastic. Well, I think it is important with education right now to really help students build these entrepreneurship skills and have hands-on practice. And students here at Santa Barbara City College are designing and implementing self-led projects. We're calling these passion projects to develop entrepreneurship skills and create a positive impact that aligns with their own passion, their skills, and their aspirations. And we are wondering, what entrepreneurship skills do you think are most important to cultivate in preparation for becoming an entrepreneur that they could focus on right now with their current projects to help them in the future as an entrepreneur or entrepreneur?
I think the number one skill is the ability to articulate and sell. So
Good.
marketing, sales is the second extreme, but marketing is the ability to articulate what you want to sell. Why are you unique? Why would people even bother to buy you? But why would they come back and buy you? What is the positioning that is going to give them a nostalgic feeling every time they see you, see your brand, see the products, and want to continually buy? Now, you can outsource a lot of things, but if you can't, pitch your idea, if you can't, articulate your idea, if you can't get people immersed in your idea, if you can't motivate people about your idea, you're not going to be able to push it forward. So you can be very passionate about it. And that's why I said there's a difference between an inventor and an entrepreneur, right? Because you can be the person that came up with the idea and can be the best and most fantastic idea, but the inability to motivate others, or at least to get them engaged and to get them excited about it, it's not going to, it's not going to move the idea. So I know you've talked about the fact that you need to, you guys do a hands-on practical, and I think this is where people can really practice, pitching that idea, because the one thing you're going to do continually, whether it's intrapreneur or entrepreneur, is always making the next person believe this is the best idea they need to be part of. Like, this is the best thing ever that they need to be part of. And that's kind of continuous, because you're going to have to keep on selling that to people. Now, when I talk about that, people think of sales, which is the execution of the idea, but sales is easier than the articulation of the idea, because sales, I can give you 40% off and you'll buy. Most women will buy things even if they don't need it, right? That's sales. Right. So sales is that execution of the idea. Sales is important, don't get me wrong. But if you can't articulate the idea, if you can't strategize on the idea, if you can't motivate others on the idea, you're not going to be able to sell it. You'll sell enough, maybe with relatives and friends and well wishes, but that's it, right?
Yeah. Excellent. So we have a question from the audience. And this is, if someone who is already in an organization wants to begin working more entrepreneurially, what's a first good step for them?
The very first thing is the financial reports of the organization. What's the problem the organization has that they've actually written down and is public, right? And do you think you have some great ideas to kind of solve some of that, because you already understand some of the internal processes? That's kind of one. The second step is, does the organization have either a strategy team, a project team, or they call it different names, or a venture, some companies call it venture team. You need to do your research. They're always smaller. And if they do, you can volunteer in that team and just say, I would like to volunteer some of my experience in that team. And that's kind of the ways I can see that. Of course, you probably have to tell your boss that you want to do it, but before you even go there, you could check those two things.
Excellent, Moyosola. So if you can believe it, we're at the end of our time. There's so many more questions we could ask, but we'll need to keep our promise to our audience. So what is the best way that our audience can follow your work and be caught up with you?
The best way for me is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best, is the fastest, is the one I reply probably quicker.
Excellent. Well, Moyosola, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure to learn from you. And to
Thanks
our audience, yes, and to our audience, thank you so much for joining us here. We hope you are fired up about entrepreneurship and building your entrepreneurship skills. And we invite you to come back and join us next week when we'll be helping everyone, people like you, to do just that. So thanks, everyone. Have a great week. Thanks again, Moyosola.
Thank you for having me.